Welcome to Beyond the Box. I'm Kyra Vandenberg. Today, we'll explore the technology shaping landside logistics with two experts from Maersk. I'm pleased to first welcome Scott Horn, who is the platform's portfolio technology leader for Fulfilled by Maersk. Welcome, Scott.
Great to be here.
And I'm also happy to welcome Simone Bonanni, who is the head of functional platform, landside, and depots execution in Transported by Maersk. Welcome, Simone.
Thank you for having me.
And Scott, we'll start with you. Can you shed some light on what technologies are proving the most transformative in landside logistics right now?
Technology is always going to be built on a foundation of good data. But once we have that, obviously artificial intelligence is really starting to play a significant part, both in getting the data in the right shape, but then doing something with the data, whether that's asking a question, whether that's revealing opportunities in terms of how we can route or we can position inventory better. So really it comes down to clean data enhanced by artificial intelligence.
And if we look at handover points and shippings, between facilities, modes, or carriers, there's often delays and errors at these points. So how can technology make these transitions smoother and more transparent? Simone, if you would like to start.
I think, as you said, logistics is a very complex business. You need to imagine that you have in any transaction, you have up to tens of operators and companies working together, exchanging information, status updates, financial data, documentation. So I think, of course, that has always been a challenge in our industry. I think technology is a key enabler there, right? And I think the ability to integrate end to end is something that is really changing the logistic landscape. I recently visited a depot in China, and I was really shocked on how actually the operations work. You have the trackers connecting with the port, connect with the depots, and you have a seamless chain of information flowing through from the right, from the left to the right, and really streaming down all the communication channels and speeding up the operations. And that's good not only from efficiency perspective, also from safety, because it really enables us to separate from man from machine.
Do you have anything to add to that, Scott?
I do, and I think Simone really raises a great point about this data handoff piece. And what artificial intelligence is bringing, I guess, to the play is this concept of shared context. One of the biggest challenges we have is obviously bringing all the parts up to the right level, up to the right speed. And AI works in a very similar way. The more context it has, the more shared context it has about the situation, the better answer it can give. Humans have things. So when you put the two together, when you have enough of the overall context, you can augment the power of each individual that's involved in the chain to do a better job. So that may be as simple as how we're routing goods. That might be timing of pickup. That might be whether the dock door works a certain way. Whether we time the positioning of containers or trailers to meet obviously the demands of a certain country. All these things are an element of shared context, and that's proving to be the valuable part of artificial intelligence to beyond logistics.
If we talk about data standardization, if we think about goods being transferred across those various facilitators along the supply chain, it seems like there's a lot of room for data errors along the way, which could mean everything. It could mean that your shipment is lost or misidentified. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for data collaboration along the supply chain? Simone, do you want to start?
Yeah, at least the way we are working on our end is what we are seeing is the API. I think we're really working a lot on enabling API on both ends. As I said before, there are multiple touch points, so we are both working on how do we enable the information to be flown to our customers. So we are looking at enabling the API for our customers to share milestones, information, and so on, and reaching also with inland milestones. The partners, our partners, are the one that help us to deliver what we have to deliver and really able to deliver great customer experience. So to be able to get that visibility, to be able to get the data that Scott was mentioning, we are also working a lot on standardizing the API. We have work on publishing our APIs in the Maersk Hub, and really we are working with them to make sure that we can get improved high quality standardized set of data that we can use in our transaction and pass to the customer. So use it for ourselves to replan shipments, etc. So
So do you feel then that there's generally a spirit of collaboration with our partners and these other facilitators and carriers in the supply chain?
I think there are obviously difference in regions, so depending on the technology landscape and how advanced it is. But for sure, the experience to working with our vendors and with our customers is very positive, and everyone is pushing in the same direction. So we are making big strides on from API and integration perspective, and we'll continue doing so because for us it's so important to be able to offer a good customer experience.
Mm. And Scott, what does that look like in your area?
Because we kind of span now a lot more, even to the consumer front, we see what people expect really starting to drive the need for this data standardization. So,
Mm.
today I have my iPhone delivered. I'm in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and I have literally the same experience as Seattle when I lived there 3 years ago, where you have it delivered exactly on the day as expected, despite it being shipped from different places, this case Belgium. So again, being able to have the data ensure that that's going to happen, but the curiosity from me just knowing where is it now? Is it going to arrive at a certain time today? With some of our customers who ship things from, say, Asia, that's becoming even more important every step of the way. Not beginning, not
Mm.
just last mile where we start to see it's shipped now and we know it's going to happen sometime today.
There's still a lot to do in actually making sure we get the visibility, and so there is a lot of discussion how to install IoTs on the containers or on the truck so that we can actually track the container at every stage of its cycle and its transportation. So yeah, that sounds like a basic need, but that's I think it's something we are still working on, and it's the core focus of what we do. Really, how do we get the data in so that we can know and we can then manage the data properly. So yeah.
Yeah, much easier said than done, I think. And switching gears, Scott, how can technology enhance rather than replace the role of people in landside logistics? I know that's something that we've talked a lot about internally, but just for our listeners, it sometimes sounds like the robots are coming to replace all our jobs, and of course, that's not really the case. So it'd be interesting to get your perspective on how the two complement each other.
If you think about an operator trying to do many things, many of their tasks throughout a day, often, they for things they already know how to do or information they have at their fingertips, they can do that. What's being enabled with this technology, particularly where it's becoming more human in the sense of you can ask a question and get a detailed answer that's validated by a set of steps that make sure that the data is correct. It takes away that need to go and do all that manual work. So you don't have to go to each one of the mapping websites to check whether that address is real. You don't have to spend the time double checking whether you're following a standard operating procedure. You can ask the question, what is it? And I'm at this step, what's the right thing to take? So you can imagine the job to be done becomes a little more focused on that job and not on trying to do the discovery around it.
Hmm.
And this is where I see it as exciting.
And Simona, you mentioned a bit earlier that you were recently visiting a site where you separated the humans and the machinery quite well to enhance safety. Could you maybe touch a bit more on that, on how technology can enhance the workforce, but also how there's a safety component there to take into consideration?
There's people on the ground, and really the ability to guide the operators, to guide the trucks at the right gates, at the right location, without the need of having someone in the yard to tell where the driver should be. And that comes through apps, and that's really enabling us to streamline the process. When the driver comes at the gate, he gets the bay to load on WeChat, and then gets to the bay for loading and unloading, and that happens completely seamlessly without having anyone to actually go down, check the truck. And on
Mm.
top of that, you can take pictures at the gates when the trucks arrive and the trucks leave, so we can get the license plates and all that information right away in a second. So really, instead of having someone working around, you can remove all of that and remove the safety concerns.
Hmm. And Simona, this has obviously been a big year of disruption in supply chain, but it's not just this year. It's the past, 5, 6 years where there's been lots of disruptions from, of course, the pandemic, but then there's port congestion, there's extreme weather, there's geopolitical tensions that are causing all these disruptions on the way. So what role does technology play in that? How can technology strengthen our customer supply chains and in the years to come where this is probably the new normal?
I think it's similar to what Scott was mentioning earlier, which really enabling us to do much more than what we used to be. What we see is a lot of, transition to control tower, where the work of the operator is really monitoring that the transportation is on time, being able to spot issues in advance and really proactively react, which means either to inform the customer about, the shipment is going to be late, is going to arrive at that time, but also look for rerouting options, right? I mean, also the computational power we have, rerouting real time in the past was impossible just
Mm.
because you didn't have the data, but also the computation wouldn't allow it, right? I mean, something that used to take hours to calculate, to understand how to route a specific shipment, now can be done in seconds at the scale, which is absolutely unprecedented. So really that data, that capability is empowering the operators to do way more than what we used to be.
Yeah. Scott, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Disruption is going to be the new normal. In logistics, most folks are used to that. There's an element. It's just a question of how much disruption and where. And the more that context can be shared ahead of time, and we can have proactive action, the way that information can be shared in a more human way. So if a driver can give it either visually or through an audible, similar to what you see when you're taking an Uber or a taxi, where they have that kind of information, that routing information flowing. That to me is the key. It could be a weather event. It could be you're not going to make the dock door in time, so it's probably best to rest now. These kinds of things starting to be built into the technology. It makes it more human, and in turn, obviously, it augments the human capability to be better. So you don't arrive in situations where you can't deliver, or you can't deliver a value-added service because whatever reason you can't do that at that location. You can't get up that hill. You can't get up that driveway. And these kinds of things I see as really key in providing resilience against disruptions, because we're taking the information and we're feeding it back, and we're using it to obviously make the service better.
Yeah. It's not just the information, it's also the actions you can take off the back of it, right? So it's not here's the information and then, operators are left not sure what to do with it, but it's more like this is how you can act on it for it to actually be valuable to your day and your operations. I think that's an important point.
And that's where I think to the previous point, that's where the human capital is coming and strongly needs, right? I think we can do more. So actually we need more capabilities, more expertise to really manage the situation, which before probably realized too late, or we couldn't act on it because it was too complex. Now we have the tools actually where the operator can really make the difference.
Simone, if you could redesign landside logistics from scratch using today's technology, what would that look like for you? If you could get rid of all the legacy technology and all the cumbersome processes and things like that, what would an efficient setup look like for you?
I think what is really interesting is that we spoke a lot about software in this conversation, but also in the hardware side, there is a lot coming. If you think about self-driving vehicles, um, fully sustainable, but
Mm.
also the way we will operate the supply chain, the operation will be very different, and would be more sustainable, safer. Again, you remove some of the drivers from the road, and again, the way to see it in the future will be, really autonomous logistics, where you would have, the operators focusing on what matters, which is taking care of the transportation for our customers.
There are elements of the hardware that Simone sort of alluded to, and again, landside, aside from automated vehicles, there's still a large component, obviously, of loading and unloading. So there's robots that obviously can unload, but there's also some, I guess, processes that are still based around humans, right? But based around those kinds of things. And while we see some robotic technology mimicking humans coming along, I think it's still early stages. It will be very interesting when we can start to take humans more out of the inventory component. Like we see that already happening with larger containers, where we have standardized sizes where we can move. But as we get into the more heavy, bulky, or adjusted, not same size environment, you find that more of a need for a human-like robot to be involved. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. I think that's an emerging technology. We've got a few players that are definitely making sometimes their whole business plans around this idea. So we're watching that space very actively.
I want to go back to something, Simone, that you mentioned about change management and get your perspective on this, Scott. That change management is such an important part of rolling out technology. I mean, landside logistics is a very labor force intensive area of logistics. There's a lot of people on the ground. What are your thoughts on what that can look like? How can we manage the change logistics process better so that these technologies are actually adapted and used to make the processes more efficient?
Anything that interrupts operations then propagates. And change is one of those. Changing a tool, changing the standard operating procedure. We've seen this each time. Folks that get very good at knowing how to do things the way they learn how to do it within their education, their experience. What we're finding we can do more now is to simulate things outside that change. Take the normal behavior, design a simulation, and do some what if scenarios and see if we change this component, how will that impact individuals? How will that impact throughput? How will that impact delivery times? So it gives us a chance to at least anticipate that and build that in, whether we need to add more people through the change, whether we need to fundamentally adjust the process. More of that can be simulated ahead of time, and a few of the things we're rolling out in the coming months, we're literally creating a digital twin, a simulation of it, so that we can run it without impacting our operators in the process, and then taking all the learnings that went wrong, fixing those, and then trying again until the simulation looks right, and then beginning the change management process. And at least that's the thing we're seeing enabled now, made possible by some of the more modern technology and the stage of evolution of technology now. But
Yeah.
I can promise you, change management remains the hardest part of, at least I think, the hardest part of Landside.
Yeah. Simone?
Yeah, fully agree. I think change management is the hard part. I think what I saw that it's working is really how to show how technology is working with the user and not against it, right? How can technology make the work better, safer, more interesting? Because instead of following up and chasing information, you're actually looking at how can I reroute a shipment, how can I improve the customer experience, how can I help my customer with the other company or end user. But of course, I think it needs time, right? For everyone that goes such a change, it requires time and it requires a lot of conscious efforts in managing change. So
Yeah. Yeah. And Scott, for you, what do you see as some low-hanging fruit right now in landside logistics technology? Is there this one thing that could easily be changed but hasn't been?
Yeah, I think easy is always a tricky word. I think what's been made easier is we can take data that's more diverse and make it more normal, or at least identify where it's not. And I often, I think coming back to what the big step's going to be here, whether it's a low hanging or whether it's more, it really comes down to, I think I call it the Iron Man moment for our industry, like where it goes from being here's something on a spreadsheet, let's move things around and plug them back into, here's a Jarvis asking us and telling us questions, asking us questions, telling us updates about what's going on, and then us responding. I think that speaks to Simone's point that, as we get more sustainable, whether it's electric or otherwise, do we even need a driver in every vehicle? Do we need someone operating a dock door, or can that be automated? Do we need someone operating a gate? Or can they operate 3 gates or 4 gates or 4 vehicles? This kind of thing, to me, I think, and while it's not low-hanging fruit, I think it's within reach now where it hasn't been in the past.
Obviously, now AI is perhaps over discussed. But if we think about like this moonshot technology that could completely redefine landside logistics, is that AI or is that something else? What do you think, Simone? What would that look like?
I think it's a combination, as I was saying before. I think AI is a big component. We speak about Moonshot, but the reality, we are experimenting on it already, right? I mean, we are actually running pilots on how do we get AI to make calls to our vendors, so to, respond to questions from our customers. So where is the container? What is the container number? What is the SIN number? So we are actually already piloting. So I think it will definitely revolutionize the way we operate, because we will be able to go faster, respond faster to our customers, be more accurate, but it's not so far ahead.
Scott, what do you think?
I think it's along the same lines. We think about, if we take 1,000 people, generally they can do a better job with the right data. You take, the ability to spin up 1,000 agents right now is much more at our fingertips, and those agents, have access to the knowledge of the internet combined with the data we have. Clearly, a PhD student for every decision is different from from folks that may either be earlier in their journey in logistics right up to have been doing it forever. I think that to me is a big part of that next step. How do we put that to work for when we're answering a customer request, as Simone mentioned, or whether we're making a key decision about dealing with a weather event or a tariff event or cross-border timing event, these kinds of things. You've got those agents to help answer your question and verify, because again, we may not always be able to throw 1,000 people at a problem, but spinning up 1,000 agents can be more cost effective.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. A big thank you to Scott and Simone for sharing your insights today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you for joining. And thank you also for our listeners for joining us. You can find Beyond the Box on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.